Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On today's show, I have a special guest. He is a he knows a lot about college football. Let's welcome him on. RicoKnows. Welcome on the show, Rico.
Thanks for having me, Alec. Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you. Uh, so let's talk about teams we got wrong this year. You go first.
North Carolina. I got North Carolina extremely wrong. All offseason, I thought they would struggle. I thought losing Dre Bly in the secondary, losing 5 secondary starters, whether it was a nickel package, dime package, whatever it was. I looked at North Carolina. I saw a lot of departures. You had Josh Downs leave for the NFL. You had Green leave for the NFL. It just felt like the cupboard was bare, losing an offensive coordinator and Phil Longo, and only leaving Drake May to carry the bag. It looked like they were going to struggle this year. Incredibly wrong. Shout out to everything they do. Mac Brown being one of 5 coaches in America that has a national title to his name, and he's proving every bit of that pedigree. They look poised to be top 10. They look better than I anticipated, and they've been dominating teams up front. I did not see that coming. Shout out to North Carolina. I got them wrong.
Okay, the first team I got wrong was West Virginia. When I did my preseason Big 12, I didn't have West Virginia winning more than 2 games. And I said at the end of the year, Neil Brown would get fired. But as of right now, it looks like he's saved his job.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he would be on the hot seat, potentially fired. Now, I was very hesitant to say he was he was getting fired, simply because I know that there are certain boosters with influence at West Virginia that don't want him fired. There's a reason he has the job. So shout out to Ken Kendrick, the billionaire donor, the actual owner of the Arizona Diamondbacks. He has a lot of say and a lot of pull. And if that man doesn't want you fired, you won't be fired. Not at West Virginia. So I felt like Neil Brown still had time to make an impact, to do what he could do. And in the spring, he really dominated the transfer portal, getting some clutch players when no one saw it coming. Tommy Dirijaw, he's one of their leading sackers. They got Anthony Wilson, an NFL caliber defensive back from Georgia Southern. Like, they just found key pieces that they needed to put in their 2 deep, and they're winning games. Now, I hope the wheels don't fall off and they stay competitive. They shouldn't have lost this last game with the Hail Mary, but it happened. So it's just one of those things where they need to keep winning to be relevant and to justify him not being fired. But, yeah, West Virginia is looking pretty solid.
I would say another team I was wrong on was, I would say, any of the group of 5 teams. Like USF, I only had them winning maybe 2 games, and they've blowing past that. They've won 3.
Yeah.
They should have beaten UAB and FAU, but FAU, that Daniel Richardson, he's no joke.
Daniel Richardson wasn't the starting quarterback to start the season. It was Casey Thompson, the transfer from Nebraska. And Daniel Richardson became the starter because of an injury to Casey. He's out for the year. But Daniel Richardson was a starter at Central Michigan before this. But that's a Florida kid transferring closer to home, making the most of his opportunities. They lost their star wide receiver, Jamal Edrin. He transferred to Purdue. So it looked like they weren't going to have anything available. They have a receiver named Jonte, and Jonte's open all the time. 10 receptions a game, probably 3rd in the country in receptions right now overall. So I like FAU as a team. I love what they're doing. Shout out to Herman. He should be coaching somewhere in the Power 5. If one of these coaches gets fired, they should hire him. But I was wrong about South Florida as well. I had them not winning more than, I think I had 1 game. I thought their talent was depleted. They lost a ton of great players, but having a redshirt freshman, when Jerry Bohannon goes down with an injury as your starting quarterback and leader of the team, and then you go ahead and find Byron Brown on your bench, and never mind the fact that South Florida had 3 quarterbacks hit the transfer portal. So that means Byron Brown last year was 5th string, yet he's one of the nation's most dynamic dual threat quarterbacks. They don't have a great defense. They get scored on all the time. But my goodness, are they good for at least 3 touchdowns in every game, no matter who they're playing, because Byron Brown is him. So, yeah, shout out to South Florida.
Let's see. Another team I think I was wrong on is Duke. I thought last year was a fluke.
Oh, no way. I was high on Duke. I knew they were a top 25 team. I talked about them all off season. I said Mike Elko is him. They are returning great players on the defensive side of the ball. Duke is still one of the best defenses in America right now. It's what's keeping them winning games, dominating games. It's why they beat Notre Dame. Or I'm sorry, not Notre Dame, beat Clemson. They beat Notre Dame for 3 quarters. It's why they're dominating games. It's not Riley Leonard, although I love Riley Leonard as a quarterback, but it's really about their defense. And Duke returned I think it was 19 starters from last year, a 9-win team, and you returned 19 starters. I just wish they had a more dependable offensive threat. Calhoun drops a lot of passes, but he is extremely fast. But yeah, I had Duke squarely in my top 25, and I still do. I think they're a problem for anybody. Nobody wants to play Duke. They're good.
I think I was also wrong on. I thought that Michigan State was going to be better than they were. I know that Mel Tucker's not there anymore. That's a whole different situation. But I just don't understand why people are saying, "Oh, Urban was in East Lansing." Urban is not coming out of retirement to coach at Michigan State.
No, he's not. Michigan State. Have you ever been to Lansing, Michigan? Lansing, Michigan is a very blue collar town. It's not. It's not Ann Arbor. It's not pretty. It's not Columbus, Ohio. It's just a little different. And there's nothing too glamorous about Lansing, Michigan. It's There's nothing too attractive about it. I think they need to hire a stud group of 5 coach, or they can go blow $90 million on one of these retreads and somebody who's been fired elsewhere. But I don't recommend it. I have a whole list or a whole video made about who I think Michigan State should sign. But going into the season, I saw Michigan State as being one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. I knew they weren't going to be better than, well, I had them ahead of Indiana and Illinois. I knew Illinois was going to have an atrocious season. I made videos on it. And for me, Michigan State losing a substandard quarterback in Peyton Thorne, but losing Keon Coleman, losing players to the draft. I knew they were bringing back a solid defense in Cal Holiday and a bunch of front 7 guys that I believed in. But the truth is, Michigan State is just not comparable to a lot of the Big Ten teams that are in the upper half. They don't match up well.
I think I was also wrong. No, I think I was right on Northwestern because I only have them winning 2 games. And so far, it looks like that's going to be their ceiling right now is 2 wins.
Yeah. You knew they would beat UTEP, which is fine. But losing your head coach is problematic, especially somebody like Pat Fitzgerald who's been there for 20 years or so. When you have that type of continuity in your coaching staff, and then you go and hire a new defensive coordinator, Brom, who's now the head coach, this man is not Northwestern. He didn't build anything there. He just showed up and inherited a lot of those recruits and a lot of those players. And he was still in the process of learning names when they fired everybody and he becomes the head coach. I think that they're making the best of the situation they have, but Northwestern as a university doesn't invest a lot of money in their football program. So they're not going to be equivalent to the teams around them who have a bigger commitment to teams succeeding.
No, and I think I was also wrong on Nebraska. I had them as one of the 5 or 6 best teams in the Big Ten.
I think it's very disappointing to see the way Jeff Sims played, and he wasn't able to produce. And now they're just going without him. They're going to stick with Heinrich, right? They're going to stick with their backup. But Nebraska's still a 6-win team. I had them winning 7 games. I think they can still win 6 games. I think Nebraska's a very good football team, especially the front 7. Yeah, they can get it done as long as they move the ball, no turnovers, keep grinding out the clock. It won't be pretty. They're not going to blow out teams and be flashy, but they can get it done. The other thing that hurts them is injuries. They lost 2 of their starting running backs to injuries for the season and having to go back to Anthony Grant, who, yes, he had 900 yards rushing, but there are games where he doesn't show up at all. And he does have a weird way of running where he holds the ball away from his body, and it leads to turnovers. So Nebraska's going to struggle, but they can win games.
Uh, what's your thoughts on Kansas State? Do you think they could still win the Big 12?
No. No, Chris Kleiman doesn't have a deep threat to utilize right now at K State. They're still trying to figure out what they want to do with Trayshawn. And I feel like getting a transfer running back from Florida State, you need to utilize him and ride him. Will Howard has been a huge disappointment this year. Doesn't take care of the ball, doesn't look locked in every game. Then they bring out Avery Johnson off the bench. That kid looks dynamite and looks like somebody you want to cheer for. But for me, I look at K State and I just think they peaked last year. A guy like who's the little running back, Deuce Vaughn. A guy like Deuce Vaughn can carry you, and make up for so many mistakes. But right now, K State very disappointing. I think they still have a good program. I think they're developing players and recruiting well, but it's just some years you're on, some years you're off, and other teams are going to be on. Now, next season, with the departure of Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC, I still think K State is competitive for the championship, but a team like Arizona seems to be the favorite going into next season for the Big 12 championship.
That Arizona's been surprising to me. I did not have them doing good this year.
Yeah. Well, I obviously somebody's got to lose in the Pac-12. I had them losing some games, but as far as surprising me, not at all. I knew the recruiting classes. I know those players. I follow high school football very closely. So I know what they have. I know what they're developing. I saw a max exodus of players from the two deep this last offseason. But what it really was a bunch of transfers because they were losing their starting position to freshmen and sophomores, right? So there's a talent turnover there. The same thing happened at Kansas, where coaches start improving the talent level around in every position group, and the incumbents, the people who are returning, they don't quite see the same work role or playing time that they anticipated, so they go and hit the portal. There was a defensive coordinator, obviously Don Brown, former defensive coordinator at Arizona, now the head coach at UMass. And Don Brown, the doctor of the blitz, this old guy, whatever, when he left for UMass, a lot of his recruits had some animosity and didn't want to be at Arizona anymore because they were recruited by a guy who's not there anymore. And so that's who hit the portal. We saw about 7 Arizona transfers from Arizona straight to UMass. Well, that didn't work out for them. As you can see, UMass, they're the only team in America mathematically not eligible for a bowl at this point. They're out of the bowl season. The only one.
And one of the things I don't understand is I've been seeing mid-season All-American people put out their mid-season All-American list, and I don't understand why. Hold up, ladies and gentlemen. Co-host is having some. My guest is having some technical issues. Oh.
I apologize. I got a phone call in the middle of this and it interrupted the damn show. Very, very sorry.
It's okay. Like I was saying, I've seen mid-season All-American lists out there where people don't have, and I know he's having a down year to what people are used to, but I've seen mid-season All-American list without Marvin Harrison, and I think that's kind of.
Well, don't ever confuse pro potential and pro prospect and draft rankings for accolades and production at the collegiate level. In other words, it doesn't matter what Marvin Harrison does on the field, he's still going to be the top receiver taken in the draft. So there are times players, they ignore their pedigree and what they're doing, and they still draft them wherever they want. An All American list can't do that. All American lists are strictly derived from production, statistical information, and kind of your national rankings. So if you lead the country in sacks, you're going to make an All American list. That doesn't mean you're going to be one of the first defensive ends drafted in the next draft. So I I applaud Marvin Harrison for playing this year. I think it's important that players play and don't get rusty and don't look like JSN. But when it comes to midseason All American lists, I don't even read them. I feel like it's wasted energy. I'll wait for the end of the season. I'll make my own list before I read somebody else's list. I don't care what it says. I don't waste a lot of energy on recruiting news or those type of polls and rankings. None of it has any bearing on me, and it doesn't have any bearing on reality. And the reality is everybody's biased. Like a lot of these products, when they say people voted on these things, you have to find out who's voting, what affiliation they have, who is their allegiance to, and you'd be really surprised to find out, oh, that's not an impartial ranking. That's not a list that can be trusted. That's just some fandom. And I don't like anything kind of, biased or anything that's going to be slanted or slided towards a particular conference, team, or players. So when you have a preseason mock draft, those things will go out and influence announcers, influence writers, influence players, and everybody goes out there and just anoints people and just says these guys are professionals. These are the best. And it doesn't matter how they play on the field. We saw this last year with Anthony Richardson. We saw this with Will Levis. They announced that they were first-round draft picks, lottery picks, all this stuff. And every pregame show before the games, they would just talk about their pro potential and how great they were. And then they'd go out there and play the game of football and stink it up horribly and play like shit. And yet they would just kind of go, oh, well, that's something they need to work on at the next level. But it's because they were already identified as next level athletes or players. It didn't matter what they did on the field. That's the nature of the beast. That's what Marvin Harrison's dealing with. That's what a lot of guys have right now is they've already been identified as studs. And this starts with recruiting stars. This starts with the guy being referenced to as a 5-star player every single time they say his name for the rest of his life. So it started at a very young age, and there's no way to break from it when there might be a better player at the position. There might be a more productive player at the position. For example, who's the best receiver in America right now? Well, we say Marvin Harrison Jr. But if I look at the games, Keon Coleman is absolutely amazing. Has the same size, the same speed, the same dynamic features, and he's actually getting more production, and he's leading his team to victory. Well, so is Marvin Harrison. He was good. You can't deny it. But the example last year, everybody swore up and down Marvin Harrison's Biletnikoff winner. But Hyatt wins it because of a 5-touchdown game against Bama. But was he really better than Tank Dell? Like Tank Dell was a 1,300-yard receiver back-to-back years, and he's currently probably the leading rookie wide receiver. What are we talking about? Are we talking about production? Are we talking about pro traits and attributes and abilities? And when it comes to an All-American list, we can't go there and say, well, he's a pro prospect. Riley Leonard and Tyler Van Dyke at Miami are both pro prospect quarterbacks. Neither one of them should be on any All-American list for the quarterback position. And they won't be.
Do you think the opposite? Do you think Josh Gaddis kind of hurt the development of Tyler Van Dyke last year?
I don't necessarily know about the development, but definitely the execution. There are players, there are people who take over jobs and they inherit certain people and they don't know how to utilize them correctly. And this could be in any walk of life, right? You could be hired as a CEO, a manager at a business, and you don't know everybody's work ethic. You don't know everybody's foundation or their motivation for working. And I believe that Gaddis, his first year at Miami last year after replacing Rhett Lashley, right? It's just one of those pieces where you're like, he doesn't quite know what he has. Motherfuckers. Excuse my language. I didn't mean to curse. I get these phone calls constantly all day long from people asking for my services. I can't stand it.
So continue with what you were saying about.
I was just saying that I feel like when you get a new job, you don't necessarily know all the pieces and you don't know everybody there. It does take time and you don't know how to utilize them. And it's really, and I'm going to say this from a leadership perspective, it's really resource management And I've been an executive level leader for a long time. I've had many, many employees. And if you don't learn how to manage and utilize your resources correctly, in this place, in this instance, resources is people. Resources are players. And if you don't know how to apply them and utilize them, you will probably fail at your job. And I think that Miami's learning their personnel and their players, and they're obviously bringing in their own set of resources that they know much better and that are more dedicated to their progression and their success, not necessarily inheriting somebody to try to believe in you. The same thing's happening right now with Wisconsin's defense. With Luke Fickell coming in, a lot of those defenders are not bought into the system because they are holdovers. They're a previous regime, right? Coach Prime didn't want to deal with this, so he got rid of everybody. But there are many coaches that don't have that luxury or that urge or that courage to go out there and wipe the slate clean and say, I'm only bringing in my guys. Oftentimes you'll sit there and make do with what you have and then eventually get to your players. So that's why they're always saying, hey, he needs his own quarterback or he needs his own recruit or give him 4 recruiting classes. Let him cook a little bit. It's happening with Napier right now. Napier had to go out and play with nothing but Mullen guys, and it wasn't Napier's recruits. Now as he gets a better chance to implement his system with players that believe in his system, well, the success may come. It just takes time. But fan bases are not patient. Athletic directors are not patient, and money talks, right? So if you're spending X amount of dollars, I'll give you an example. There's over $2 million being paid, $2 or $3 million being paid a year to Barry Odom at UNLV to be the head coach at UNLV. They invested an absorbent amount of money into a head coach who's now either the first or the second highest paid head coach in the Mountain West. So you take a seller team like UNLV who never wins in the Mountain West, and you go and hire an SEC caliber coach. Barry Odom used to be an SEC head coach. And when you hire him, he has to prove and show dividends. He has to pay dividends. He has to make it, be profitable. If he was struggling, there's no way he would keep his job. But in the first year, they're 5-1 right now, on the verge of a bowl game, and they're about to get back all that money. He recruited greatly, developed players immensely, and he dominated in the transfer portal for his team. That's a coach getting more out of his structure and his players than a lot of other coaches in America, for sure.
I think that there's 3 teams that should be ranked in the rankings right now, but aren't, and I don't specifically know why they're not. And I want your opinion. One is Miami of Ohio.
Okay, who are the other 2?
SMU and James Madison.
And JMU. Okay, so among those 3, I agree that they are all very good teams. But you have to ask yourself, if you want them in the top 25, who are you taking out? Right? Who are you taking out if we're doing comparisons? Now, for me, JMU makes a lot of sense being ranked. They look dominant against Georgia Southern, far more dominant than Wisconsin did. And Wisconsin was ranked at some point, yet JMU hasn't been ranked. But when you look at a team like JMU, they were in a shootout with Virginia, one of the worst group of Power 5 teams in America. And you got to ask yourself, why weren't they more dominant in that game? JMU is averaging, I believe they're allowing like over 300 yards passing every single game. If you're a quarterback and you're playing JMU, you're going to get 300 yards passing. And they're not stopping that. So that's an issue. SMU, interesting choice. I love everything about SMU. Transfer portal, flipped their whole roster. They look comparable to Power 5 teams. They played well against Oklahoma, good enough, even in a loss. They was more respectful than some of these other teams losing by 70 or something like that. So I like SMU. And who was your third one?
Miami of Ohio.
Miami of Ohio, yeah. So Gabbard at quarterback, hitting Gage Larvadain in the transfer portal was huge. I posted many videos about this. Miami of Ohio, to me, if they can beat Toledo, obviously they're going to win the MAC. But they look like they have a very stout defense. They look like they're not giving up a ton of points, and they're just overachieving. And I'm impressed with Miami of Ohio. I really am. And I don't say that about a lot of MAC teams. But Miami of Ohio just looks to be a different breed. Beating Cincinnati was that wake-up call to the rest of the world. Like, yo, this is a real team. They're known goods. So I don't know if they're top 25. because you got to take somebody out of the top 25 to put them in. But they're definitely the teams you listed are definitely there. They're getting votes every week. They should get there. But what I want to tell you is if Clemson wins, we got a problem because they're going to take a 2-loss Clemson team and rank them well before any of these group of 5 teams. It's just the reality of the situation. Because if you ask a voter, if these teams had to play Clemson, they think Clemson's going to win 99% of the time against all 3 of those teams. And I'd have a hard time justifying it otherwise. So are we really picking and they feel the same way about A&M. They feel the same way about Arkansas. They feel the same way about Kentucky, right? All these teams, despite them losing, they'll just go, oh, no, the eyeball test tells me they're better. And you're fighting the eyeball test versus production on the field and results. But a team like Tennessee, if they were to lose, they beat the brakes off of Virginia. Like, it wasn't even close. They won by like 30 or 40. So when you compare them and neutral opponents and like opponents with JMU, it just doesn't match up. There's just better teams regardless of record.
If you had to choose 3 head coaches that are on the hot seat right now, who would they be?
Well, I know who's getting fired, and then there's the hot seat, right? So I know who's getting fired, and then there's the hot seat. And the hot seat is far more significant than who's getting fired. Let me make that clear. Because the hot seat means you're at a winning program with expectations, and you're not meeting those expectations. So a guy like Jimbo Fisher is definitely on the hot seat. But is he getting fired? I don't know. I don't know if they have the buyout money for that. I don't know if they're willing to take that chunk and eat it, or if they're willing to give him another year to cook. But Jimbo Fisher comes first and foremost. The next one is Dino Babers at Syracuse. The wheels are falling off immensely. They only won games that they were supposed to win, and they're looking terrible in every other game. So Dino Babers, Jimbo Fisher, those are up there. And then Dave Arnett at Mississippi State, for me, is on the hot seat simply because it's his first year, and he doesn't look to be an SEC West caliber head coach. Okay. So there's Arnett, Babers. Forgive me, I'm just going off the top of my head here. Obviously, Tom Allen at Indiana, Hafley at Boise at Boston College, Andy Avalos at Boise, Dave Aranda at Baylor, Danny Gonzalez at New Mexico. I think he should just be fired. Tony Elliott at Virginia, fired. These guys are not being competitive, and they're not making their teams, they're not getting their teams to that level. I think I just gave you 10 names. 10.
What about Holgorsen at Houston?
So Dana Holgorsen, they just beat West Virginia on a Hail Mary. They can still get their act together and win some games. So we'll see how they end in the Big 12. He did well in the transfer portal, but they're spending a lot of money on recruits. They're spending a lot of money in the NIL, and it's not showing up on the field. So Holgorsen is in that field. Another guy is Brady Hoke, San Diego State. They're the laughing stock of, production in America. I watch every FBS level game in America. I watch every single FBS game. I go back and rewatch them during the week. Every single day has a different theme for me. Today, I'm rewatching all Big 12 and MAC football games. I watch them all over again. Big 10. Wednesday's Big 12 and the American Conference. But when I go to watch Fridays and I have to watch all the Pac-12 games and the Mountain West, do you know how much I dread having to watch San Diego State football and Maben at safety, or Maben, the former safety turned quarterback? I just can't watch It's so boring to me. It's more boring than an Army Navy game, and I can't stand those teams. Go figure.
I couldn't agree with you more. I put San Diego State on the other day, and I maybe watched 5 minutes, if that.
It's hard football. It's hard to watch football. And I know all the players, and I'm pulling for every single one of them. I know the 2 deep on every team in America. I'm excited when, other people get opportunities to play. But when I watch that game, those teams and those players, it's difficult. And it's the product that they're putting on the field. So you ask me hot seat coaches, there's 10 out there that probably shouldn't have jobs. Now, finding viable candidates, that's somebody else on another roster, right? Like, for example, Canada. Is it Canada? What's his name? Matt Canada at
with this
Iowa State.
Campbell.
Matt Campbell. Whoa, I said Canada. I'm thinking still he's coordinator. Woo! No, Matt Campbell, Iowa State. When I look at Matt Campbell, I want to say he's on the hot seat, and then they start winning games, and they're looking good despite losing Hunter Deckers to that gambling fiasco, despite losing players. But last year, they only won 4 games, and they were competitive in every single one of their losses. They could have very easily won 8 games. This year, they're actually pretty damn tough, and it's hard to tell what's going on. Anthony Beck's the little son. Anthony Beck's son is the new quarterback coach the new quarterback, 6 feet tall, new quarterback for Iowa State. And I look at him and I'm like, yo, this guy, Rocco Beck, is the real deal. I think they have something here, and they'll be competitive in the Big 12. So you can't fire that coach once he's developing freshmen and finding the right players, and he hasn't lost the locker room despite only winning 4 games the previous year. It's just a different dynamic. And then you look at coaches like Halfley at Boston College. I feel like he's lost the whole team. I think they're gross. And they fired their last head coach for winning 7 games a year. And now Halfley he lost to UConn last year. You know, as a Boston College guy and a Power 5 team, you can't lose to UConn in your state. Like, you just can't do that. And he did.
And they almost lost to Holy Cross this year.
Holy Cross is a good team, but still, yeah. Being in a shootout with an FCS team is problematic. Holy Cross is very senior laden, returned all their 3-headed monster. Like, Holy Cross is not a joke. But still, Boston College hitting in the transfer portal with Thomas Castellanos, the transfer from UCF. Shout out to Ware County here in Georgia. But it's just apples and oranges. You can hit on a transfer here and there, but Halfley's an NFL guy. He's a defensive backs coach. He's not a head coach. Doesn't have a lot of experience recruiting. Doesn't have a lot of experience running an FBS caliber program, and it's showing. And it shows every single offseason, and it shows during the season. Now, do they have players that can win some games? Sure, but they're not winning any games that they weren't supposed to. You know, when you watch somebody who's good at poker, it's easy to win with the nuts. It's easy to win with the winning hand. It's easy to win with the winning cards. It's really hard to win when you don't have the winning hand. You can still do it. You just have to bluff them out into folding. You have to win with your bet aggression and your chips placement and stuff of this nature. You have to win with different mannerisms and things. When I watch college football, I see some teams that don't win unless they have the winning cards. They don't win unless they have the deck. That goes to A&M. That goes to Boston College. That goes to USC. I see teams not winning when they don't have the nuts. And that's the problem. The mark of a good team or a great team is learning how to win no matter what your cards are, just by your mannerisms, your muscle memory, the way you carry yourself, and what you depict to others. And I think they're struggling with that at Boston College, among other places.
Do you think USC still makes the playoff?
They'd have to win out. They'd have to win out and be impressive the whole way. Whoever wins the Pac-12 will get to the playoffs as long as they have one loss. They're going to get a playoff spot just for the sheer depth and competition in the conference. But if you have more than one loss, you're not getting there. Anybody. Because Texas, Oklahoma will only have one loss. Bama, Georgia will only have one loss at this point. Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, one of them is going to only have one loss. Florida State's going undefeated or have one loss. UNC, one loss. There's other one-loss teams out there that are fighting for those 4 spots. You can't have 2 losses and get in. So, yes, if USC runs the table the rest of the way, they'll get in, but I don't see it. No way. They don't look like Washington. They don't look like Oregon. They don't even look like they want to play Utah. And they're playing them this week. I don't know. The defense is real.
Do we know when Cam Rising's going to be back?
I hope he never comes back. I hope he just rests and gets his knee together, but they shouldn't rush him back for the sake of some college football wins. No. I don't know if he's NFL pedigree caliber, whatever, but I don't think he should be rushing back. He has other things he should be concerned with. His health is paramount.
what are your three best defenses in college football right now?
Right now, three best defenses. Number one, Michigan. Without a doubt, number one, Michigan. Number two, and this is going to sound surprising, we're going to find out this weekend, but I think it's Penn State. Penn State's got an amazing defense. They've been shutting people out. They beat the brakes out of some teams. I like Penn State's defense. Number three defense, I like Georgia's team speed. I like Georgia and what they do on the defensive side of the ball. I like their team speed. I got to put them at three for sure. I feel bad leaving out Washington, leaving out teams like Iowa or Utah. They do have good defenses, but if I had to put it all together, Michigan, Penn State, and Georgia. Those three defenses are great. Florida State's defense is just studs everywhere. So NFL caliber studs everywhere. So there's some good defenses in America. I feel bad for leaving some out, but knee-jerk reaction off the top of my head, Michigan. I guess Penn State's there just by recent results. We'll see if they can shut down Ohio State. We'll see.
Where would you put Ohio State's defense?
Somewhere in the top 10 for sure. What they did against Notre Dame is impressive, but when I look at the individual players, I feel Ohio State's defensive front, well, they're all pretty solid. I like their secondary, but they tried to address it in the transfer portal, so that tells me how much depth.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is having a little bit of technical issues. He will be right back.
Hey, sorry about that, man. I just wanted to come in and say thanks for having me. I apologize. I get crunched for time, and I get a lot of phone calls, and I have a lot of moving parts. So thanks for having me again, though.
You're welcome.
I just want to say have a blessed day. Keep doing your thing. Good luck with your sports podcast, and just keep grinding.
Thank you. Have a good one. And now, back to the regularly scheduled part of the show. My upsets this week. My first upset is Baylor over Cincinnati. Upset pick Baylor plus 3.5. My second upset this week is JMU over Marshall. JMU upset pick James Madison plus 2.5. This third one is a little bit wacky. It is Boston College over Georgia Tech. Upset pick Boston College plus 6.5. My covers this week on the Tuesday show are cover number 1 is Duke plus 16.5 against Florida State. Number 2 cover this week is Pittsburgh plus 1.5 over Wake Forest. And number 3 cover this week is Rice plus 3.5 over Temple. Over Rice plus 3.5 over Tulsa, and Temple plus 14.5 over SMU. And now here's my co-host for the Robbie and Alec show, Robbie Colleton. Here's his upset picks. His first upset pick is BYU over Texas Tech. Upset pick, obviously, BYU plus 4.5. His second upset is Miami of Florida over Clemson. Upset pick, Miami of Florida plus 2. And his third one is Utah over USC. Upset pick, Utah plus 4.5. And then here are my Tuesday over-under picks. My Tuesday over-under picks. My first one is UCF versus Oklahoma over 65 points. I like there to be a lot of scoring in this game. Number 2 is FAU versus UTSA over 58.5. Same with this one. I like there to be a lot of scoring in this game too. And my last one is Penn State, Ohio State under 48.5. I think this is going to be a defensive struggle, and it's going to be low scoring, not a lot of points. On Friday's show, I will have more over-under picks, more upset picks, more cover picks, and my best bets. And again, thank you to my guest today, Rico. Please go follow him on TikTok at RicoKnows. He talks a lot about college football, and I enjoyed having him on the show today, but that's not going to do it just yet. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen the community poll in my YouTube community, I am starting a Madden franchise. Probably at the end of this week on Thursday, late Thursday afternoon, early Thursday night. If you haven't already voted and there's a straw poll on my community tab, please do. There's 2 different ones. The leader right now for the franchise is the Falcons. And this is going to be a YouTube and Twitter based franchise mode for Madden. I'm doing it in Madden 23, but I have the updated Madden 24 rosters. So, and anybody and everybody can chime in the comments with moves they want me to make in the franchise, players they want me to drop, players they want me to trade for and trade away. But that'll wrap up today's episode. I will see y'all again on Thursday. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.